Now, we have, first up, we'll hear from our speakers, Helen Zille and Mayor Chris Pappas. As I mentioned, there'll be a really good chance at the end to ask questions, so have them ready. The session will also be recorded, just for your information. Now, a couple of reasons why this call is so important. There are over 206,000 South Africans here in Australia alone, and there's about 70,000, I believe, in New Zealand. And we need to make sure at every election we do everything we can to help people to register to vote online. Now, I've been told that 60,000 votes here in Australia is equivalent to about 1 MP in Parliament. So it is really important to register to vote. So if you haven't done so already, please do it tonight, tomorrow. Tell your family members and everyone, as it's very, very important. So welcome to this very special event. I'm Manny Poll. I'm the current chair of the DA Abroad for Australia, proudly representing the 206 plus thousand South Africans on this land. Before we dive into the evening, I would just like to read out an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the Bedigal people. They are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are present on this land here today. Thank you. Now, I'm very pleased to welcome Helen Zille. She's the former leader of the DA and Mayor of Cape Town and the current chairperson of the Federal Council. She was an anti-apartheid activist and former journalist at the Rand Daily Mail. She has played an instrumental role in uncovering the truth behind the death of anti-apartheid activist Steve Biko. A seasoned politician, activist and thinker, Helen Zille brings a wealth of experience and insight to any platform, making her an invaluable speaker on issues of governance, social justice and political leadership. Alongside her, we also have Mayor Chris Pappas. Thank you for joining us as well, Mayor. He's the Mayor of the Umgeni municipality. He is the DA's party candidate for the premiership of KwaZulu-Natal in this year's election and is one of South Africa's fastest rising stars in the political world, with Mayor Pappas being included in the Time 100 Next list in September last year. Helen, Chris, welcome to the South Africans in Australia registration rally call. We're excited to have you with us. Helen, I would like to pass the mic to you as our ears are burning to hear how the DA plans to win this next election. Over to you.
Hi there, Manny and Ludre. Our chairman of DA Abroad worldwide is Ludre, and Manny in Australia, based in Sydney. And I also want to say hi to Alex and Okozi and everybody else who's on this call from wherever you are. Thank you very much. It's only for the Australians and the New Zealanders that I have to say good evening. And it seems a little bit weird to be saying good evening on such a magnificent morning in Cape Town. Now, I first want to make you all homesick. You have absolutely no idea what a beautiful day this is. Blue sky, warm, green, we've had lovely rains. The place is looking absolutely spectacular. And it's the kind of day that you will all feel very homesick for and want to come back for. And our job in the DA is to make sure that your grandchildren can't understand why you ever left South Africa, and that they all want to come back and that they all apply immediately to come back because there's such a great future in this prosperous, peaceful country. And essentially that is the role of the Democratic Alliance. And we work day and night to make that happen. And as you also may know, we've got an election coming up in May this year, but you must never confuse the announcement of the date with the proclamation of the date. Those two things are different things. The president can announce, and shortly after that, there is an official proclamation in the Government Gazette, and only then do the registration opportunities close. But when the ANC wants to get it together, they will announce and make the proclamation about 24 hours apart. So the critical point that I want to make is this: we are running out of runway to get registered for this election. And the purpose, the main purpose of this meeting is to ensure that every last possible individual, South African living abroad, can actually register and can actually vote. And the good news is that shortly after the registration weekend, we had 29,000 people from abroad registered on the IEC's database as people who were going to vote for abroad. And then online registrations and our promotion of online registrations has brought that up to 40,000. So that's a lot, that's 11,000 people, and 11,000 votes are not to be sneezed at, because we always talk about the power of one in South Africa. Chris Pappas and I both have the power of one in common. He got elected as mayor of Umgeni by 1 vote in his council. I got elected as mayor of Cape Town in 2006 by 1 vote in the Cape Town Council. So 11,000 is an absolute fortune compared to 1 vote. And every single one of those votes does make a crucial difference. And in South Africa, we're very attached to one. 1 has become a lucky number in the last year. In fact, in the last few years, because the Springboks won the quarter finals, the semi-finals, and the finals of last year's World Cup on a single point in each match. And I don't care where you are, you wouldn't be on this call if you didn't still root for the Springboks. And Bafana has just won a very crucial qualifying match with 1 point. And Dricus du Plessis, he is our mixed martial arts world champion. He also won by 1 point. But Dricus du Plessis also wins politically because he basically has done as much to mobilize the interests of South Africans in getting registered to vote as anybody else has done, because while he was talking about the world champions, he noted that South African government is world champions in corruption, which they didn't like at all, but which we said was absolutely true. And we have been backing Dricus, and he has, I understand it, accepted an invitation to the launch of our manifesto on the 17th of Feb. And guess where we will be holding that manifesto launch? Right in front of the union buildings. And of course, that has to signify that we're on our way. We are marching to Pretoria, and we will hold our rally on this lawn of the union buildings, right under the nose of that magnificent statue of Nelson Mandela. And on the lawns, there's another statue of Louis Botha. So all the statues will be there. Hopefully the Fallists won't be coming there to rip down any statues, but we're hoping to have a fantastic rally to launch our blueprint to rescue South Africa. Now, all of that is in vain. We can have the very best plan in the world, but if we can't get voted into office, it rather defeats the point. And so I just do want to salute people like Jerome Swirsky. Is Jerome Swirsky on this platform? Jerome Swirsky is an active South African who lives in Perth, and he wants to vote. And according to some new regulations that the Department of International Relations and has promulgated, the only places that South Africans will be able to vote is in the actual embassies. And honorary consulates and other places are now decided to be off limits. And Mr. Swirsky was not taking any of this. He wrote to the IEC and said, he's a South African citizen. The Act says he's allowed to vote at any consulate. He wants to go and vote at the honorary consulate in Perth. The law allows him to, and no regulation can supersede that. So we agree with Mr. Swirsky, and we are going to back his case all the way up to the Constitutional Court, if necessary, to have the IEC and DIRCO open all of the consulates and embassies and every other official place for the South African government open to our citizens to vote. We have a very large contingent of South Africans in Perth. The unofficial estimate is about 2 million South Africans abroad, but we've actually have a reliable figure on 900,000. And in Australia, I think there must be about 20,000 South Africans in Perth who are eligible to vote. And so we need to get them voting. And if we can get them voting, it'll be through champion active citizens like Jerome Swirsky, who hasn't turned his back on South Africa, but realizes that it is the most extraordinary country in the world and that one day you would all like to come back. He has a personal responsibility to help towards that end. So I would like to salute Jerome Swirsky, and we will, on the basis of his complaint, back him up and go all the way to the Constitutional Court if necessary. But we're hoping to win that case before the election. But even if we do, it is going to be totally useless to win that case and not have you registered. So the critical thing is now, while we still can, and before the election date is promulgated in the Government Gazette, please all register. Don't say it is absolutely pointless for me to register because of this new regulation put out there. Was it by DIRCO or was it by the IEC? It was DIRCO, I think, eh? They put out this silly regulation. Don't be put off by it because we will get it overturned in court. It is unlawful. But make sure that when we do get it overturned, if we manage to get it overturned before the election, that you are registered. Equally, if you have lost your South African citizenship because you acquired the citizenship of another country and Home Affairs decided, well, you no longer deserve to be a South African citizen and cancelled your South African citizenship. That is another case the DA has taken up on your behalf. We took it up and we won it in June last year. On the 13th of June last year, the number 13 is lucky for some, and it was lucky for all South Africans who'd lost their passports and their South African citizenship as a result of acquiring the citizenship of another country. The wonderful news behind that was that the Court of Appeal threw out that particular Home Affairs ruling because it says it's unconstitutional. So you're entitled to your South African citizenship. No one can strip you of your South African citizenship. And if you're one of those people in that position, register to vote, please. Because even though the Supreme Court of Appeal has decided that it's unconstitutional to strip you of your citizenship, and the DA fought that case right up to the Supreme Court of Appeal and will continue fighting for you. But because it has a constitutional implication, because the Supreme Court of Appeal said that this is unconstitutional to strip you of your citizenship, and they agreed with the DA's contention in court, because it has constitutional implications, the ConCourt has to verify it. The ConCourt has not verified it yet. We're hoping they will do it before the election. But again, you don't want to then sit with a ratification of your right to dual citizenship just before the election, but because you didn't know whether that would happen, you didn't bother to go out and get registered. So please, irrespective of whether you think you're going to be able to vote, register now. We are going to do everything to fight to get you the right to vote. We already have taken that a very long way, and we are convinced that the law and the Constitution are on our side, but it doesn't help if we win and you're not registered. So between now and the proclamation of the election, the name of the game daily is register, register, register. When your name is there, it's like winning the lotto. You can't win if you didn't buy a ticket. You can't vote if you aren't registered. And you absolutely have to, because everybody wins when you vote DA. Now, obviously, we know that most voters voting abroad are DA voters. And we fight for all our voters, wherever they are. They don't have to be abroad. In fact, we don't fight as much as I would like to fight for our voters abroad, but we've taken these two huge court cases, one to the High Court, one to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and now we're taking the other one to fight for your rights. And your rights means your children's rights and your grandchildren's rights going into the future with their links to this amazing country that one never gets out of one's system, as you would all know. So now, we have sent the department a very stroppy letter. Let me tell you what we've said. We've written to the Chief Electoral Officer of the Electoral Commission, and the Minister of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And we have given them tomorrow, till tomorrow. So tomorrow, Friday, 9th of February, is the deadline we have given them to concede to our demands that the Commission, that's the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, and DIRCO will confirm that they will not irrationally and unlawfully distinguish between consulates headed by transferred staff and by honorary consuls. The DA demands these confirmations by no later than tomorrow. What that basically means is the letter that they sent out saying that they would not use consulates as places that you could vote because they had to have South African staff, not transferred, not staff that are based in their home countries. They had to have South African staff. They had to have transferred staff to those embassies to enable them to turn it into a voting station. That's a totally arbitrary and unlawful requirement. We're demanding that they withdraw that requirement and make all consulates, whoever they are headed by, all South African consulates, be they embassies, consulates, or high commissions, give them all the right to and the duty to become voting stations for you in the election. We do have an honorary consul in Perth. We are very, very keen to get those votes happening in Perth, Manny and Corsi and various other people. We really want to mobilize those 20,000 South Africans in Perth to make sure they come and vote. And so they must register now and not leave it too late, because if they think, well, I can't go to Canberra, so I might as well not register. We believe we will succeed in getting the honorary consulate in Perth as a voting station. So please, wherever you are, mutatis mutandis, anywhere in the world, and there's an honorary South African consulate anywhere near you live, register, because we're fighting for your right to be able to vote. So that's an important thing to bear in mind. Another critically important thing to bear in mind is this. We now have 40,000 people registered to vote abroad in the DA, vote abroad on the voters roll. 40,000. We believe that the vast majority of those 40,000 registered to vote abroad are DA voters. But we will tell you that that will bring us a whole additional MP. If all of those people vote and vote for the DA, we will get an extra MP. Now, with the margins as tight as they are, that one person could make all the difference. After this election, South Africa will either be governed by a coalition led by the ANC, or it will be governed by a coalition led by the DA. Those are the two options. It is almost taken as a given now that the ANC will fall below 50%. We don't know how far they will fall below 50%, and we must never underestimate the ANC as a mobilization machine. They're very good at it, especially just before the election. Then they start playing the race card and claiming that we would take them back to apartheid and all this kind of complete and utter nonsense, and start their scare stories like we will take away people's social grants, which we would never ever think of doing. In fact, the only way to guarantee your grant is to have the DA take over and not steal all the money that are meant for grants. So we will face a huge onslaught, and every single seat is going to count. I know this because I governed a 7-party coalition in Cape Town in 2006 that had a majority of 1 seat. 1 seat. And if some voters hadn't just voted for that 1 seat, we wouldn't have been in government in Cape Town, and the history and the story of South Africa would have been very different. Exactly the same with Chris Pappas in Umgeni. So getting that 1 extra seat is absolutely critically important for us. And when you get to remainders in proportional representation systems, the nice thing about those remainders is that you can get another seat if you are the next highest remainder. And so every vote does count. And we can still push that up to get 2 votes from DA abroad. if we mobilize and get everybody registering that we can possibly get. I was fascinated to see where people are and how many there are. We should have over 11,000 South Africans voting in London. We should have over 3,000 voting in The Hague. We should have over 1,000 voting in Dublin. We should have over 1,000 voting in Dubai. We should have over 1,000 voting in Canberra alone, but 20,000 in Perth. And a lot in Sydney. I haven't done the sums in Sydney. I'll leave Manny to do that. Abu Dhabi, almost 1,000. Wellington, New Zealand, almost 1,000. New York, almost 1,000. Berlin, about 500. And Port Louis, what a lekker place to live, is also right up there. So every vote will add up to an extra 1 and possibly even 2 seats. And if we can, between the registration weekend and now, up the registrations by 11,000, there's no reason why we can't do that and more in the days ahead. So that is absolutely crucial for us. Now, if you're going to be abroad and you are registered to vote and you would like to vote abroad, there is this magic thing called a VEC 10 form. V for victory, E for election, and C for coalition, VEC. Okay? A VEC 10 form enables you to vote outside the country if you are registered inside the country. So anybody who's going to be outside the country and wants to vote has to fill in a VEC 10 form.
Helen, may I please help you?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
So we get quite lucky now. For the first time ever, South Africans can register to vote overseas. And so the VEC 10 process is for those people who haven't done the online registration for overseas voters.
Correct.
And what we're actually asking people is to please register overseas. If they live overseas, don't rely on the VEC 10 form, because I tell you why. If we have 10,000 people register in Canberra, and obviously those people now live in Perth and Sydney, then it makes our case better for the overseas more voting stations. So the VEC 10 is for those people who forgot the online registration process up front. So there's a proactive bit, and then there's the forgetting bit, if I could put it like that.
Okay, so that's very, very important, Ludre's point there. The number 1 point is register, and register overseas.
Yes.
So that you are a voter registered abroad for the South African election. First prize. If you still happen to be registered in Cape Town somewhere, and you're now living abroad, and you forgot to register from your address abroad, then you can still fill in a VEC 10 form. But don't rely on the VEC 10 form.
Yeah,
that
move
is
it from Cape Town. Yeah, move it from Cape Town. Yeah, move from Cape Town now to Australia, please. Don't,
Yeah, that's unless you are just on holiday in Australia.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, but the bottom line is if you live in Australia permanently and you want to claim the right to vote and not hassle about this every election, register yourself as a South African voter at your address in Australia. And don't forget to change that address if you move house, because South Africans are rather sticky about addresses on the registration voters roll because of the DA opposing people running around to different provinces to vote the DA out when they feel like it. Right, so the VEC 10 form is an exception form, not the rule form, and we are here to punt the rule. Be registered where you are and qualify to vote. So those are the points that I wanted to make. I know that there will be a lot of questions, but I don't want to take too much time. I've been nearly going for half an hour. And I would very much like you to listen to the dynamic Chris Pappas. I know that when we have rallies, and this was billed as a rally, we should be shouting Viva, we should be hopping around from one foot to another, which is a political dance in South Africa known as the Toi Toi, of which you should all be familiar. And we should be doing all of those things, but I've not found a way of transferring that yet favorably to Teams or Zoom. But no doubt Chris, being one of the up-and-coming young people, has found a way to do that. And so I'd like Mr. Chairperson Manny to hand over to Mayor Chris.
Thank you very much, Helen. And please, everyone, welcome Mayor Chris Pappas. Thank you for joining us, Mayor. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Manny, and thanks, Helen, for putting me on the spot there. I don't think I've found one yet, but I'm sure we can all viva together. Here in KZN, we're doing away with the original fist, and we're saying viva with one finger, because it's the power of one, as you said. It's lovely to be with everyone today. I must disagree with Helen from the onset that it's definitely not beautiful Cape Town, but it's beautiful KwaZulu-Natal. For those of you who come from here, you'll know that we have more than just a flat top mountain. We have a lot more than that. But yeah, I do appreciate the opportunity. You know, the small town that I come from, they said we would never do it. They said that it was impossible. They said the DA should stop trying. This is KwaZulu-Natal, and that we would never govern here. This is the land of the IFP and the ANC, and that we should rather go and concentrate on Cape Town and go and concentrate on white areas, as our opponents would say. But 18 years of hard work, and we won. We won a small municipality of 120,000 people, known as the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. So for those of you who know where that is, it is Howick, Hilton, Nottingham Road, the beautiful areas of the Midmar Dam, the Karkloof forests, right next to the foothills of the Drakensberg. So it wasn't overnight, it was an 18-year slog to be able to say that we now govern outright. So that's with the majority for the first time in KwaZulu-Natal. We've created a beachhead, the proverbial blue beacon, or blue diamond, as some others say. In a province otherwise who's known only two political parties really through the history of our democratic period. And we didn't do it by 10,000 votes. We didn't do it by some miracle. It was hard work, and in the end it was 42 voters who made the difference. Voters decided that they really wanted change in our beautiful little towns. And that is what we won by, the slimmest margin that a municipality has been won by in the history of South Africa, and that's 42 votes. And what was amazing about that is that it was not young people that did that. It was people who were, it was older people who were passionate about seeing the communities that they'd grown up in and built change. I remember the IEC was trying to mess us around, and the machines weren't working, and there was a whole lot of problems. And there was a 92-year-old lady standing at the Christchurch voting station, and she stood there for 4 hours. She stood there for 4 hours because she was determined that she was not going to let the IEC beat her. And just before 11 o'clock at night, she cast her vote and one of the last voters to vote. And when we counted, we had a 98% turnout at that voting station. And we won the entire municipality by 42 votes. So the reason why I mention this is often we find ourselves detached, or we think that our individual power can't do anything to change the circumstances of what we face, and nothing could be further from the truth. Whether you're sitting in Perth or Brisbane, whether you're sitting in Auckland, wherever you are in the world, your vote does matter. And for that 92-year-old lady who was determined, I mean, I did give her a free cup of coffee to stand there, but it was a cold evening. But she was determined to prove something. And the beautiful thing is that it was not only in areas that you think vote for the DA. In the township areas and in the farming villages, where you have 99% people who are Black South Africans, we managed to increase our share of the vote as well, from 7% to just under 14%. And now that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's thousands of people who've shifted their vote to something different. So you don't need to win over everyone. You need to win over enough people to be able to shift the political sands in whatever direction you need to. And what that's meant for our municipality and for our area is that we are now debt free. We've managed to pay off all our loans, all our debts. we have managed to increase the number of free or number of households who receive free basic services. So under the ANC government, who is supposedly this government that cares for poor people, only 133 people were getting free basic services. And under a DA government, who is supposedly anti-poor and anti-black and all these things that we hear, there are 3,000 people who now have access to free basic services, 3,000 households actually. We've purchased equipment to the value of 30 million rand instead of having events, filling up tents with people and giving people food parcels. So we have equipment now that can build roads and clear stormwater drains and cut the parks and keep stadiums open so people can play sport. We've increased roads and maintenance budgets, so it's now almost 8% of our budget is on maintenance. This constant belief that the DA doesn't care for the poor. We have the biggest basket of free basic services out of any municipality in KwaZulu-Natal. We look after the people who can't look after themselves. And that's something that our opponents can't compete with because they can't manage their finances to a point where they can actually do that. And importantly, 2 weeks ago, the Auditor General gave us another unqualified audit. So for years and years, we've had qualified audits. And the Auditor General came along for the second year running under a DA government and said, you guys are managing your finances well. We can see what you're doing with it. There's evidence to prove it. And there are two important things that we managed to improve on were consequence management, in other words, fighting back corruption and fraud, and and basic service delivery, which are ultimately is what we're supposed to be doing as government. So those 42 people managed to do that. And we can do the same in South Africa and the same in KwaZulu-Natal. No doubt, as Helen has mentioned, we have huge challenges as a country and we have huge challenges as a province. We can't run away from those. We either have to confront them or allow our opponents to win. And many of us have decided that we want to fight against that, and there's more to fight for than to lose. But there does come a point where some of those things become unfixable, where small towns, where municipalities, where more and more now big cities are getting to a point where too much is broken for it to actually be fixed. But our country is not there yet. Our country is not at a point where it's not unfixable. And that is what we're fighting to do. And that's why we've named our election campaign the Rescue South Africa campaign. Because we are rescuing what is left, we are rescuing that which we can fix, and we're rescuing the future for many, many, many people in this country who still believe in that concept of a rainbow nation, although dimmed, but it still exists. And many people hold on to that. And that's the power of hope, I guess, at the end of the day. So elections require a lot of things. They require time. I mean, as we are all sitting here, you've taken the time, and we appreciate that to listen to us and to all the organizers as well. The rest of us who are on the field every day, addressing media, it takes a lot of time, and to all the volunteers as well. It takes a lot of energy, specifically in a political climate where there's fake news, misinformation, there's, the moral ethics of politics has degraded to such a point where you can say anything in South Africa and not be held accountable. And it takes a lot of money as well. We are a donor-based organization, so we rely on donations from everything from someone sitting in their home giving 10 rand to big businesses giving millions of rands. And that's how we put up the posters and we fight the court battles and all of that. But there's one thing that we haven't spoken about enough in this particular election, and that is that elections take courage. It takes courage to get out there and confront communities who are angry and who have lost hope. It takes courage to stand up against opponents who are literally killing others in the streets. And it takes courage to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to take a day off work and travel across the country, if it's Australia, to go and cast my vote, because that's how much it means in another part of the world. We heard the figures earlier that, we could possibly get another 3 MPs just from the votes in Australia. And that means an incredible amount when you're fighting back against a behemoth that relies on state resources to sustain itself. But this courage is pointless if we don't actually have a plan. We can tell you all the sweet words and we can sing poetry to you, but at the end of the day, we need a plan. And despite what many people think, that plan is actually very, very simple. And we've heard it a few times, the power of one. And our campaign here in KZN is called 1 + 1 = win. And that's our formula. The formula is if every DA voter finds one other DA voter, we can win. And if you look at the national statistics, the DA has about 3.6 million voters. If every one of those voters gets one other person, whether they are registered and they are not voting anymore, whether it is a family member overseas, whether it is a child who's just turned 18, an employee, a next door neighbor, whoever it is, if every DA voter got one other person to vote DA, that means we double our vote. And it really is not that difficult. In KZN, that means going from 500,000 votes to just under 1 million. And that shifts the political landscape incredibly. Forget about all the other political parties and what they do. But there are so many unregistered voters and there are so many despondent voters that if we can mobilize those people, and that takes collective effort. Unfortunately, you can't outsource your democratic responsibility, and that's what democracy is. We all have to participate. But that's what we're saying to people, is that the plan is simple. If we're all registered and we all get out, then we can really move the political sands in our country and in our province, in KZN in particular. And there are various ways to do that. The colleagues on DA abroad, these sorts of platforms. There's the multi-party charter, which is taking shape and mobilizing voters and collectively bringing those opposition parties who are serious about change together. And the DA will constantly fight to be the center or the anchor of any sort of organization or mobilization movement for change that is based on the rational center of politics in South Africa. And it is difficult, especially in a world where people want you to exist in extremes. They want you to be pro or anti. They want you to be for or against. But the reality is that we all exist somewhere in the middle. And that despite having different views on different things, many people actually want the same thing across the world, and especially in South Africa. And when you bring those people together, and that's what the DA is trying to do, you really have a force for good. You can fight and argue about the small things that come along, but ultimately, many people in their homes are speaking about the same thing. It's how to keep the lights on, how to put bread on the table, how to ensure that there's law and order, how do we respect each other as individuals and as communities. And it's all the same conversation. All the noise that comes from outside really tries to distract us. There's a struggle song. Maybe this is where I can put Helen's challenge into this particular forum. There's a struggle song that goes Noma besitubula besiaya besbulala. And translated, that means even if they shoot us, even if they chase us, even if they kill us, we will go to elections. I lost a friend not so long ago. In December, a colleague and a friend of mine was murdered. Councillor Helen Zille, who was my chief whip. And he was murdered because he was trying to do his job. We always knew this would happen as the DAs. Somewhere along the line, one of our councillors would be murdered in this political turmoil that we have specifically here in KZN. Not that it makes it any better or any more right. But Nhlal'enza fought every day for a better country and for a better future for his family. And while some still sing struggle songs based on racial segregation and apartheid, and that's how they mobilize voters, we're in a completely new struggle. And whether they like it or not, they are opponents. Whether they like it or not, we are in a struggle for our future, and people are dying. Just yesterday, an IFP councillor was killed in the municipality next door to me, along with two children in a taxi for no reason. So we're in a struggle for our future, and a struggle for what is right, and you have the power to assist us in doing that, no matter how far away you are from the halls of power in Pretoria and in Cape Town. Just like the 42 people in Umgeni who made a difference, your vote, no matter if you think it's one, it does make a difference. Our journey was 18 years to change a municipality and make history. Our country is now in 30 years of democracy. So we've been slogging away at it for 30 years, from a party that started, post-elections with under 2%, or post-democracy with under 2%, to a party now that holds the real rational center with over 20%. So 30 years, that's the mark. how will your votes change the trajectory of the future? And that's only a question that you can answer. The power of one, how will you use your power? I think that's my question to you guys today, is how will you choose to use your power to be able to make the change like we're doing in KZN and like many other places in South Africa under DA governments are trying to bring hope in a situation where often we think it is hopeless. Don't underestimate the power of hope. It is an incredible tool for change. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Mayor Chris. It's been a challenging journey, I'm sure, and we really appreciate your time with us today. Ludre, I might come to you, as I know that there's been some questions firing in the chat box. I also welcome those who would like to come off mute to ask a question to either Mayor Chris or Helen Zille. Please do put your hand up. I think you can raise your hand, and Ludre can unmute you. But Ludre, I'll pass to you quickly if there's any questions in the chat, and then we can come to more verbal questions.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you, Helen and Chris. It's always such a privilege to hear you guys speak directly from the front lines. Helen, we've had some questions in the chat box, but I wonder if you can just maybe shed some light on the multi-party charter arrangement, just what the DA's role and position is in that, just for those who are not familiar with that, if that's okay. And then I'll look for hands that have been raised for any more questions, but maybe Helen, just on the multi-party charter, just to give a bit of introduction, please.
Yes, thank you very much. The multi-party charter is an initiative by John Steenhuisen, our leader, to bring together parties that could feasibly have enough in common to form a functional coalition government. We know that you have to have at least a common values base in order to make a go of governing, because values underpin everything in government. And so the parties that we called upon were parties that at least notionally believe in non-racialism, believe in the rule of law and constitutionalism, believe in a market economy being the engine of economic growth, and believing fundamentally in the separation of party and state. And those were the four critical yardsticks or bars that any party had to meet in order to be even considered or approached to be part of the multi-party charter. And there are several parties in it, some that I've never heard of before. They came out of the woodwork to join us, which is fine. They're very welcome, because as we say, the power of one, every single vote is going to count. We'd far more prefer if that vote was for the DA than for fracturing the opposition vote, because the more parties you have to hold together in a coalition, the more difficult it is, and the greater the risk of having people who are only after their own interests and not after the interests of South Africa. They start their own parties to see whether they can get into a position of holding the balance of power, in which case they can sell that one vote for a lot in a council, and the DA doesn't play that game. Other parties play that game, which means that most people who promise the voters that they will vote against the ANC, in fact, the minute they get into a position where the ANC offers to buy them out lock, stock and barrel for their vote in the council, more than likely and more often than not, they're prepared to put their own interests above what they committed to their voters. And the DA is the only safe way of keeping the ANC and the EFF out, the only party that won't betray you for the ANC and EFF. But we recognize that people are going to vote around, they always do, and it's the inevitable consequence of a proportional representation system, so that is where we're going. So the parties we have at the moment are the IFP, the ACDP, the Freedom Front Plus, Action South Africa, the DA, and a couple of other parties like the UIM that you've never heard of, the United Independent Movement and various others. And they've come together in the multi-party charter, and we are committed that wherever we can create a majority and push the ANC under 50%, we will form a coalition together. Now, there are many reasons that are valid for doing that and taking that move, and the key reason is that it gives people hope. People really believe that we can do it. And that means that their vote is relevant. If you know that your vote will be contributing to a possible new majority and could make all the difference, then you're less likely to remain apathetic and to stay at home and complain all the time. You're much more likely to say, as Chris has just urged you to say, I have the power, it's my vote. And I can see that it can make a real difference. It won't just be a waste of my time. So I'm going to go out and vote. And that has had a tremendous influence on projected voter turnout, because if people's vote can really make a difference to the outcome of the election, they feel relevant, they feel they can actually do something about the decay they see all happening all around them, and then they want to go out and vote. So that's been a huge advantage of having the charter. Then also, look, let me be frank, I think it's a long shot that we're going to be able to govern South Africa. Not impossible, but I think it's a long shot. But what we should definitely be able to govern with the contribution of all the charter parties is Gauteng and possibly even KwaZulu-Natal. In our polling for the last 6 weeks, the combined vote of the IFP and the DA is above 50%. And so that indicates that the ANC will be pushed below 50%, which indicates that the IFP and the DA could form a coalition government in KwaZulu-Natal. And that would be a massive step in the right direction. And if we could get coalition governments under the multi-party charter governing Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, and then having a DA outright majority in the Western Cape, we would effectively govern the provinces that house the South African economy. And that makes a profound difference. So while the multi-party charter will make a big difference everywhere, its significance will reverberate in Chris Pappas's province, where he's the premier candidate. You can imagine having Chris Pappas there as the premier, what it would change there for us. And where the coalition partners who are in the multi-party charter are actually polling higher than the ANC EFF at the moment. And then, of course, Gauteng. We all know that that's the powerhouse. It may be very broken, but it remains the powerhouse. And we need to manage the economy of South Africa because a lot follows from that. So that is what the multi-party charter is, and that is why we are likely to have some DA-led coalitions in more places than the Western Cape, and we're hoping to win the Western Cape outright again.
Thank you, Helen. Can I give Cedric a chance to speak?
My great concern is that I'm very encouraged by the development of the multi-party charter. But as Helen suggested earlier, it's a long shot to get in. And I don't know whether we can afford to wait another 5 years, because if the country is going to go as far downhill in the next 5 years as it has in the previous 5 years, there won't be much worth saving. And so I'm going to suggest a very radical suggestion that I think could get us a lot more voters. And that is, would the DA consider promising voters a referendum to elect a president if they obtain a majority? Candidates would be obviously John Steenhuisen and 2 black politicians with undoubted integrity who fully embrace the DA's values and goals, e.g., I'm giving examples and I'm not saying these would be the guys, Musi Maimane, Herman Mashaba. I believe this would significantly enhance the DA's appeal and could tip us over 50%. So is this way too radical for the DA to even consider? Is it even legally possible to do something like that?
Cool. Helen, let me take 2 more questions, and then we can take that. We'll take a 3 at a go, if that's okay. So those on the referendum for presidential candidates. Then next, I'm going to give Bukosi a chance to ask a question, and then JC Anakum. Bukosi, you just go on mute, please. And thank you, Cedric, for the question. Bukosi, the mango button is next to the red leaf button on top. JC, can you find the unmute button?
Yes, I can.
Oh, cool. Okay. JC, can we go so long? Just tell us where you are before you start and who the question is for. And then, Bukosi, you look for that unmute button.
Sure. Hi, good
JC.
evening, everyone. Yes, so I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand. I have registered to vote, just FYI. So here in Auckland, we'll have to travel to Wellington to go and vote there, unfortunately, which I will do gladly. My question, however, is, so I've got two people living in my house who also would like to vote, right? And vote for the DA. However, their passports have expired, and the time frame for getting a passport renewed in New Zealand in Wellington takes 6 to 12 months to get a passport renewed, and plus an additional 6 months to get an appointment. So the first sort of time slot they could get was in September this year to go to the embassy or the consulate or the mission, and then it takes a further 6 to 12 months to get it approved. First of all, I don't know where they get 6 to 12 months, even if they just courier the document to South Africa and back, that shouldn't take that long. But in any case, that's, I guess, for two people I know, that's a barrier to go and vote this year.
Okay, let's do the referendum one, right? Only the president has a right to call the referendum. So the problem is that you have to win before you can call a referendum. You can't call a referendum instead of winning. So you have to win a majority, and you have to be in a majority either alone or in a coalition that will go with you in order to call a referendum. So that's the first point. The second point is just this past week, there was some legislation to see if Alan Winde, the Premier of the Western Cape, could call a referendum, despite the fact that there isn't enabling legislation at national level. And the answer from the Constitutional Court was no. So you first got to be the president before you can call a referendum. So it's not legally possible. The second point is that we have had Musi as our leader and our presidential candidate. We've been there. And we lost votes. We lost 600,000 votes across all sectors of the voter market. So far from taking us closer to 50%, it took us significantly more away from what we originally got in 2014. So all I'm saying is that we've done that and been there.
Well, thank you, Helen. Then just on the passport question, JC, we feel your pain. Honestly, this has been a big problem all around. And so the inefficiency and the dysfunctional Department of Home Affairs overseas passport renewal process has been in shambles. And so we've been fighting very hard for this to be improved. We've had petitions, parliamentary questions and actions to get passports renewed fast overseas. There has been some changes around the world. They have been outsourcing to some other locations. However, we know this doesn't fix the problem for Wellington and people in Australia and New Zealand as it stands. Unfortunately, we do not have a magic wand answer other than please just start the process, because we never know what's going to happen. Please just start the process anyway, number one. So no matter how despondent you are or how big the 6 months feels, just start it anyway, wherever you are. Number two is, in the lucky event you get to fly to SA between now and May and go visit the great weather locations in Cape Town and KZN, just go there, because in SA it takes about 5 days if you go to a functioning Home Affairs department. And then thirdly, those people who think they may have lost their citizenship but still have a valid passport, do not miss the opportunity to register, because the National Register is where this information is kept. And obviously, as Helen mentioned, we fought a court case for those citizenships to be reinstated, which may happen very soon as the Constitutional Court rule. So JC, there's no magic answer. Just start the process now, because you never know what might happen. If you'd like to go SA, just go get it there. And thirdly, if you think you may have lost it but still have a valid passport, just go register anyway.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex from Sydney, and I just wanted to know what the multi-party charter is currently polling at.
We poll the individual parties. We don't poll the multi-party charter. So that's important to know. And what we know from polling the individual parties is that we're likely to win 2 more provinces and come much closer at national level. But now I would like to answer something in the chat, if I may. Somebody asked about the Western Cape Powers Bill. Now, the Western Cape Powers Bill is a bill submitted by the DA in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, aimed at creating the framework to devolve national powers to the province. And most specifically, the powers that we want to undertake are safety, which would mean a lot more power for the province in terms of police and the management of the police and investigation of cases, etc. The second thing we want is to be able to generate electricity, which currently resides in national government. And the third thing we want is to fix all the things that Transnet and PRASA, Transnet is railways and harbours, and PRASA is passenger rail. So freight rail and passenger rail in the harbours, because they are the lifeblood and the veins and the arteries of a functioning economy. And everything in the Western Cape works, except for the things that the national government is responsible for. And so we want those powers devolved to the Western Cape government so that we can grow this economy and create jobs. That's the number one priority. And obviously we can't grow the economy without electricity. We can't grow an economy because there isn't any confidence for investors if we can't bring down crime and violence. And if there isn't a functioning public transport system, especially the movement of freight, you can't have a functional economy and a proper port. So we can't fulfill our manifesto promises without more powers. Now, I know that there have been some Mickey Mouse opinions that this is unconstitutional. It is not. We've had one of the top senior counsels in South Africa give us, in fact, he drafted the bill, together with our exceptional lawyer, Alzon Jonker. They drafted our bill. And it is entirely constitutional for powers to be devolved to provincial from national government. And we're saying that there is an imperative that it should be, for the very simple reason that the national government cannot deliver themselves. They can't generate enough electricity, they can't keep people safe, crime continues to spiral, and they have destroyed more rail. They've destroyed more rail under the ANC than stretches from Cape Town to Kilimanjaro. That's the length of the rail tracks the ANC has destroyed while it's been in office since 1996. More than 3,000 kilometers of rail have been destroyed. And most of that affects freight rail and passenger rail. So it shows you that it's absolutely incredibly difficult to run an economy. Now, in the Constitution, there are very explicit mechanisms for provinces to intervene in local governments if local governments can't get things right. There are equally mechanisms for the national government to intervene in provinces if provinces are not getting its mandate right. And we say that the Constitution makes provision for local government and provinces to do the same with national, where they're not getting it right. And specifically, the clause 238 of the Constitution makes it totally possible where the national government can't deliver a function to devolve that power to the province. And that is all we're asking for. And we believe that the courts will back that because they understand that, for example, local governments can't fulfill their constitutional mandate of reticulating electricity if the national government isn't fulfilling its mandate of generating electricity. So then they obviously, to be able to fulfill their mandate in the Constitution, which is to reticulate electricity, local governments obviously have to be able to generate it if the national government can't do its job. And that's what Section 238 is about. So go look under 238 of the South African Constitution. I've got it right in front of me. An executive organ of state in any sphere of government may delegate any power or function that is to be exercised or performed in terms of legislation to any other executive organ of state, provided the delegation is consistent with the legislation in terms of the power, in terms of which the power is exercised or the function is performed, and B, exercise any power or perform any function for any other executive organ of state or on an agency or delegated basis. There it is. And that's how it happens everywhere.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks for that. Okay, we have one more question. Just because we're out of time, Chris had to leave us. Unfortunately, we had some questions from him on the clean audit, the unqualified auditor general's report. But I'm going to give it to Dwayne. Dwayne, do you want to ask a quick question, please, and then hand it over back to Mandy for closing us out?
Yeah, good day from Melbourne. Just wanted to find out in layman's terms, just a quick one. What is the DA going to do? What steps are you going to take to get more stations, say like in Australia or in New Zealand? Just want to know, because I was a bit late. So I just wanted to find out what is the steps that I'm going to take from now on. Thank you.
Helen, shall I take that one? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. You were a bit late, but I will quickly repeat. Tomorrow is the deadline for our demand that they open every single consulate, embassy, or high commission in any part of the world where South Africans want to vote. That's what the law says. That's what they have to do. And we're fighting it in court right now. And it's on the back of an excellent complaint put in by a Mr. Jerome Swirsky, who's a South African living in Perth. So I take my hat off to Jerome Swirsky. Please tell him if he's not on the platform.
Thanks, Helen. Exactly. Cool. Manny, over to you. Back to the studio.
Thank you, Ludre, and thank you everyone for all of your questions. I can see the chat still firing, so we will look after this to address any questions and contact you if possible. But I would just like to say thank you very, very much for your attendance. Thank you to Helen Zille for making the time. I know it's busy. I know Sona's coming up, and also to Mayor Chris Pappas for joining us today as well, and to my co-host. Thank you, Ludre, for keeping things in order and helping everyone with the mango buttons. That's all from this evening. We have recorded this. We'll share some highlights and some common questions as well. I think it'd be really great. I'm very, very happy to see everyone online this evening. Have a great time over the next few days. Please register to vote online, and we look forward to seeing the DA take it out this year in the election. Thank you, everyone. Have a great one.